What happens when your neighbor decides to clean your pool by secretly pouring chemicals into it? She has no idea that you are not just the owner of the yard, but a person capable of turning silence into the loudest response. What happened next forced the entire neighborhood to rethink the rules of the game. You ever have one of those perfect Saturdays? You know the ones. Sun out, just humming through your speakers, ribs slow cooking on the grill, and your grandbaby squealing in the background like she just discovered the magic of cold water on a hot day? Yeah. That was me last Saturday. I had just finished cleaning the pool. My pool. For the third time that week. Water was crystal clear, the way I like it. I even trimmed the hedges and laid out fresh towels for my daughter and her kids. I might be 57, but I still run my household like the old days. Tight, clean, with love in the details. That's how I was raised. My daddy used to say, "You take care of your space like it's sacred, 'cause if you don't, nobody else will." And after all I've been through, layoffs, health scares, losing my wife too early, the one thing I wasn't going to compromise on was peace. Peace and my backyard. But of course, peace don't live on Elmcrest Circle. Not anymore. Not since Karen moved in next door. Oh Lord, let me take a breath before I go there. This woman, and I use the word generously, moved in 6 months ago with more complaints than furniture. First it was, "Your wind chimes are too loud." Then it was, "Your grill smoke bothers my allergies." And last week, she actually called the HOA because my grandson had a squirt gun in the yard. Said it looked intimidating. A squirt gun, man. I tried to be patient. I did. I smiled. I waved. I even brought her banana pudding during her first week. But some folks don't want peace. Some folks see a black man in a house he owns with a backyard bigger than theirs, and suddenly, everything you do is a problem. Now, I didn't know things were about to go nuclear. Not yet. Back to Saturday. I was in my backyard chair, sipping lemonade like it was a reward for surviving another week of corporate nonsense, when I heard it. A splash that didn't belong. It wasn't the kids. They were with my daughter on the porch. And it wasn't me because I was mid-sip. So I got up, real calm. Calm like your pressure about to boil, but you're still trying to be polite. Walked over to the fence. And there she was, Karen, with a plastic jug in her hand, leaning over my fence like gravity don't apply to her, and pouring something into my pool. First thought, maybe it's an accident. Maybe she's watering plants. Maybe I'm overreacting. Second thought, that ain't no plant water. I shouted, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" She turned, all smug like I just interrupted her important gardening ritual. "Oh, don't worry," she said, waving her hand like I was a butler. "It's just a cleaning solution. I read online that chlorine levels in public pools can be very harmful to children." I blinked. Once, twice. "Public pool," I said. "Ma'am, this is my private property. My private pool." "Well," she sniffed, adjusting her visor. "You keep inviting so many people over, it feels like a community center. I thought I'd help out. Now listen, I'm a God-fearing man. I believe in grace. But I also believe that when someone dumps chemicals into the water your grandbabies play in, without permission, without warning, that ain't grace. That's war. And this woman, she just declared it. "You just contaminated my pool," I said, my voice low. "Do you even know what you poured in there?" "It's non-toxic," she said, waving me off again. Probably. I clenched my fists, not because I wanted to hit anything, but because if I didn't, I was going to scream loud enough to wake her HOA board from the dead. I walked away, not because she was right. She wasn't, but because the kids were watching. And I promised myself a long time ago, I'll never let them see me lose control. Not for anyone. Instead, I called the pool company. They came out Sunday morning, took one look and said, "Sir, this water's done for. You'll need a full drain and flush. Filters are fried." The chemical reaction. Well, let's just say it wasn't pretty. Total damage? $4,200. I almost dropped the phone. I'd saved that money to repaint the house this fall. Guess the house was staying faded. But you know what hurt more than the money? The principle. The sheer nerve. That woman decided she knew better. She thought her opinion gave her permission to step over my fence, into my life, and pour whatever nonsense she bought from a Facebook ad into a space where my family rests. Later that day, I called the police. Now don't get it twisted. I don't like bringing the law into my yard. I know how things can go sideways quick. But this wasn't about beef. This was about safety, about rights, about saying no more. Officer came. Young guy. Took notes, nodded a lot. Even said, yeah, I've heard about her from the neighbors. But then he sighed and said, without camera footage or a witness, it's hard to do anything criminally. You could try small claims court. So let me get this straight. She climbs my fence, poisons my pool, and I gotta prove it even after she admitted it to my face? I asked him if I'd walked over to her garden and poured salt on her roses, what would have happened? He hesitated. Exactly. After the officer left, I sat by the empty pool, staring into the chemical-smelling drain, wondering what kind of world we live in where the victim always gotta explain himself. Then I remembered something. See, what Karen didn't know, or maybe forgot, was that I had a new security system installed last month. Full perimeter. Night vision. Audio. And baby, it caught everything. What happened next changed everything. You won't want to miss how I handled this mess with precision, pride, and a little bit of payback. Stay tuned for part 2 because this story's just heating up. I ain't slept right since Saturday. Now, I'm not talking about tossing and turning because your mattress is lumpy. I'm talking about the kind of tossing that comes from running 1,000 angry conversations through your head, knowing you didn't say half the things you wanted to and the other half would have gotten you arrested. Sunday came and went in a haze of bleach and back pain. Draining a pool ain't no joke, and I don't care how many times those YouTube pool guys make it look easy. By Monday morning, I was so tired I poured orange juice in my coffee and didn't notice until I took a sip. But that security footage? That footage had me wide awake. I reviewed the whole clip Sunday night. There she was. Karen. Climbing up on her little step stool like she was about to bless my backyard with holy water. Only it wasn't holy. It was something with a label that read, Algae Kill Pro Max Industrial Grade. I paused the video right on her face. Clear as day. Her lips moving, muttering something about contaminants and too many of them. Huh. I knew what that meant. But I wasn't gonna give her the satisfaction of making this about race. Not yet. That would come later when her own words would do the talking for me. Now I may not be rich. I may not be fancy. But I've been around long enough to know when you get proof, you don't just shout it into the wind, you use it. Properly. So I did what any man with a fully updated Dropbox and years of watching courtroom dramas would do. I called a lawyer. A friend of mine, Chuck, went to high school with me back in '85. Now he's a real estate attorney downtown. Wears pocket squares and drinks espresso but still owes me $50 from prom night, so I figured we were even. Chuck came over Monday afternoon, sat on my porch with a lemonade, and watched the footage with the same expression you see on preachers right before they close the Bible and say, now this part's gonna sting. When the video ended, he leaned back and said, you're sitting on a slam dunk civil case, Mike. That pool damage? That's property destruction. And if you push, you might even have grounds for trespassing. Plus, he glanced at me, depending on what she said out loud, maybe even discrimination. I nodded. Then I told him about all the other little things. The HOA complaints. The loud passive-aggressive comments over the fence. The time she told my daughter that our kind doesn't usually host neighborhood barbecues. That was when my patience had started leaking like my old water hose. Chuck pulled out a notepad and said, we'll gather it all. Paper trail, video evidence, HOA letters, everything. You just sit tight and don't confront her directly. Let the system work. I laughed. Let the system work. Brother, that line hit like a punchline at a funeral. But I didn't argue. Not then. Instead, I thanked him, shook his hand, and sat with my thoughts as the sun dropped behind Karen's oversized plastic flamingos. Now here's where it gets messy. Tuesday morning, I woke up to a knock on my door. 3 knocks. Real official sounding. I opened it to find Janice, head of the HOA, standing on my porch with a clipboard and a face like someone who just smelled a bad potato salad. Mr. Thompson, she said. We received a complaint from Ms. Karen Hamilton that you've been recording her without permission. She's claiming invasion of privacy. I blinked. Let me say that again, she poured chemicals in my pool and now I was the criminal? I invited Janice in. Politely. Made her coffee, gave her a chair. Then I showed her the footage. From start to finish. Even zoomed in on Karen's little bottle of eco-terrorism. Janice turned pale. I didn't know, she muttered. Karen didn't mention this. Oh, I bet she didn't. I paused the footage again, this time right as Karen whispered, "They're always so loud. They ruin everything." Janice closed her notebook. "I'll have to bring this to the board," she said. I leaned in. "Do that. But let me be real clear. If y'all try to flip this back on me, if this turns into some he said/she said circus, I will take this so far up the HOA's flagpole the birds won't even recognize the zip code." Janice swallowed hard and left without finishing her coffee. But it wasn't over. Not even close. By Wednesday, Karen must have known the walls were closing in because she doubled down. I came home from work to find a brand new sign in her front yard that read, "Keep our neighborhood safe, no unauthorized gatherings." It was facing my house. You read that right. My house. Now I've seen petty. I've been petty. But this was world class. I called my daughter, told her to hold off on this weekend's cookout. Not because I was scared, never that. But because I knew Karen was baiting me. Trying to get a rise. Trying to twist the narrative and paint me as the angry neighbor, the troublemaker. Nah. If she wanted a show, I was gonna give her one. But it would be my stage. I went back to my security footage. Clipped the best moments. Karen climbing the stool. Karen dumping the chemicals. Karen mumbling about them. And I did something I'd never done before. I posted it. No drama. No caption war. Just when someone helps themselves to your property like they paid the mortgage. By Thursday morning, that clip had 8,000 views. By Thursday afternoon, my niece said it was on Nextdoor, Facebook, and even on a Reddit page called Neighborhood Nightmares. Let me tell you something about viral justice. It ain't perfect, but it's fast. Karen's phone must have blown up because that evening she came storming across my lawn like a Macy's Day float without a handle. Finger wagging, lips flapping. "You had no right to post that," she snapped. I stood on my porch with a bowl of popcorn. "No right?" I said. "Oh, you mean like the right you had to poison my pool? Or the right to make my grandkids play next to chemical soup? You're making me look bad," she shouted. "No, ma'am. You did that all by yourself." She huffed, spun around, and stormed back. I could hear her yelling at her husband inside the house. Meanwhile, my phone kept buzzing. Neighbors. Strangers. Even a local journalist asking if I'd be willing to speak about backyard discrimination in suburban America. And somewhere between the third message and fourth chuckle, I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every person who's ever been told to sit down and shut up. Every homeowner who's been treated like a trespasser in their own yard. Every time you're polite, patient, peaceful, and still the villain in someone else's story. I wasn't going anywhere. And neither was the surprise I had planned next. This is the turning point. Everything you've been waiting for? It's coming now. Stay close, because what happens next will flip this whole story upside down. You won't believe how the tables turned. I woke up Friday morning with my phone buzzing like I owed it money. Texts. Missed calls. Notifications piling up like junk mail. For a second, I thought someone in the family had an emergency, but when I picked it up, I saw what was really going on. The video I posted? It blew up. I mean, it exploded. Over 60,000 views and counting. Local news reached out. Someone tagged a national talk show. One of those community blogs that covers everything from lost dogs to city council scandals reposted it with the headline, "Woman caught dumping chemicals in neighbor's pool claims it was a favor." And that right there was when everything shifted. Let me tell you something about being black and middle-aged in America. We grow up knowing how to keep our heads down, how to avoid being too loud, too angry, or too visible. We learn to play the game just to keep our peace. But sometimes the game changes. And this time I wasn't playing defense anymore. The first sign that things had turned came at noon. I was out front cleaning up some branches when Mr. Deschamps from across the street walked over. Now, Deschamps don't usually say much. Military guy, real private, keeps his yard like a museum, but today he looked fired up. "You handled that mess like a boss, Mike," he said. "Whole block's been watching. Some of us just didn't know what to say till now." I blinked. "You saw the video?" He laughed. "Saw it? My mama saw it. She called me from Baton Rouge talking about, 'Tell your neighbor I'm proud of him.' Now that hit me deep." Before long, other folks started speaking up too. Maria from the end of the block. Mr. Patel. Even Sheila, who normally avoids any drama like it's catching. Turns out I wasn't the only one Karen had a problem with. I was just the first one to record it. She'd been leaving anonymous complaints, harassing families, making up rules and throwing around HOA letters like she wrote the law herself. By Friday afternoon, I had 6 written statements from neighbors. Some even had doorbell footage of Karen walking by their houses, and muttering about keeping standards high or removing unwanted activity. Unwanted activity? Huh? I guess that's what she calls kids playing tag now. But just when I thought I had seen it all, she gave me one more gift. Around 3 p.m., Karen decided to host a neighborhood meeting. Uninvited, unannounced, and unhinged. She rolled a foldable table out to the end of her driveway, slapped on a homemade sign that said, Community Preservation Committee, and started handing out flyers. Flyers. I walked down my driveway with a folding chair and a plate of ribs, just to see how far this circus would go. She spotted me and immediately went cold. You're not on the list, she said, blocking me with her clipboard. I took a slow bite of rib. Didn't know democracy had a list now. She scoffed and turned to the 6 confused souls who actually showed up, holding her little speech like it was the Constitution. I called this emergency meeting to address the growing issues on our block, she said, eyes darting toward me. Particularly noise, crowding, and unsanitary backyard activities. That's when Deshawn stepped forward. You mean cookouts? Karen blinked. You mean kids running through sprinklers? Maria added. Karen tightened her jaw. We have to uphold property values. Now here's where it turned. I reached into my folder, the one I had been very patiently organizing all week, and held up a printed photo of her pouring the chemical jug into my pool. Big, clear, color, labeled. I didn't say a word, just let the image speak. Whispers, murmurs, gasps. Her face turned the shade of spoiled yogurt. Where did you get that? She hissed. I got a security system, Karen. Like any responsible homeowner who's tired of being treated like a guest on his own land. I was trying to help, she snapped, voice shaking now. This is harassment. You're Karen, I said, holding up my hand. I'm done arguing with you. You stepped over the line. And now, the whole street knows it. Then came the best part. My daughter, bless her heart, pulled up just in time with her laptop and a portable speaker. Sorry I'm late, she said. But I thought folks might want to see something. She clicked play. Footage rolled big, bright, high definition. Right there on Karen's own driveway. People watched. Some shook their heads. Some muttered under their breath. Karen tried to shut it down. Tried to cover the screen. But she was too late. She had poured the chemicals. She had muttered those words. She had made herself the villain. And now the script was public. When it ended, nobody clapped. Nobody yelled. They just turned and walked away. That silence? That was justice humming. That evening, I sat on my porch with my daughter and grandkids. We didn't talk much. Didn't need to. The sun dipped low, and for the first time in weeks, my chest felt lighter. Then a message pinged on my phone. It was from a local reporter, the same one who had seen the video earlier. We'd love to do a story on how you stood up for yourself and what it says about communities today. Can we come by for an interview? I stared at it. Then I smiled. I wasn't just going to tell my story. I was going to make sure folks like me, the quiet ones, the kind ones, the always polite ones, knew they weren't alone anymore. And as for Karen, oh, I hadn't forgotten her. Not by a long shot. Because the real surprise, that part was coming next. She thought it was over. She thought silence meant surrender. But the final move, that's where the real lesson landed. Don't miss part 4, where everything she built comes crashing down around her. Let me tell you something about silence. Silence is powerful. Silence is heavy. But silence, when it's earned, that's freedom. And that Friday night, sitting on my porch with the quiet wrapping around me like a well-worn coat, I felt more free than I had in years. No HOA letters. No Karen storming through her garden with binoculars. No stress creeping through my chest every time my grandkids laughed too loud. Just the sound of my wind chimes, the same ones she tried to get banned, whispering like they were in on the secret. But see, it wasn't over yet. Not really. Karen thought the embarrassment from the video would be the end. A little public shame, a little finger-pointing, and maybe I'd feel satisfied and move on. But people like her never understand the damage they leave behind. Not until it shows up in their mailbox, in their bank account, in their reflection. So when my lawyer, Chuck, called Monday morning with that calm tone he gets when he's about to change somebody's whole afternoon, I knew the wind was still blowing in my direction. Mike, he said, got some good news. We're filing the civil claim today. Now, I'm not a man who sues over spilled milk. But this was a whole toxic gallon poured over my peace, my wallet, and my dignity. And thanks to Chuck's thoroughness, plus a neighborhood full of now very motivated witnesses, we had everything we needed. The chemical analysis from the pool, the repair receipts, the footage, Karen's voice clear as a bell. And the kicker? HOA bylaws she violated when she crossed into my property. Chuck said she's looking at a couple grand in property damage plus punitive costs if the judge sees malice. Malice? That woman poured spite like it came from a pitcher. But I wasn't out for revenge. Not really. What I needed was for the system to say you were right to stand up for yourself. And she was wrong to walk all over you. By Thursday, the buzz had gotten bigger. Turns out the reporter who reached out earlier didn't just do a small segment. They ran the story on local TV. Then it made its way to one of those viral Justice for the Little Guy YouTube channels. Over 1 million views by the weekend. People started showing up. Not to gawk, but to support. One lady drove 40 minutes just to hand me a thank you card and a homemade pound cake. Another brought over pool toys for my grandkids. One elderly brother stopped by and said, "You gave folks like me a voice. I've been quiet for too long. I didn't know what to say. All I could do was nod and swallow that thick feeling in my throat." But not everyone was happy. Karen? Karen was unraveling. I kept catching glimpses of her pacing through her living room. Curtains open, then closed, then open again. Like a fish tank full of denial. Her little community committee sign had disappeared. Her flamingos? Gone. And one morning I noticed her for sale sign sitting quietly at the edge of her lawn. I didn't cheer. I didn't smirk. I just nodded. One neighbor down, 20 more still learning. But fate? Fate wasn't quite done dancing yet. It was mid-July when the court date landed. I wore my best suit. The same one I wore to my daughter's graduation. Ironed it twice. Walked in calm. Head high. Karen showed up with a new haircut and a long list of excuses. She told the judge she had no ill intent, that it was all a misunderstanding and she only wanted to protect the community. But the judge? He wasn't buying the sweet tea she was selling. He leaned back, reviewed the footage, the statements, the HOA bylaws, all of it, then looked her square in the face and said, "Mrs. Hamilton, your actions displayed clear intent to damage and intrude upon someone's private property. The court finds in favor of Mr. Thompson." Just like that. No drama. No outbursts. Just justice. Cold and clean. The judgment? She had to pay for the pool damage and cover part of my legal fees. And she was officially cited for HOA violations that would follow her record for years. I walked out of that courthouse feeling 10 feet taller. Not because I won money, but because I stood up. I didn't shrink. I didn't get nasty. I stood my ground like my father taught me. Back at home, the neighborhood threw a cookout in my yard just because. Dashawn manned the grill. Maria made her famous potato salad with raisins this time, but hey, we forgave her. And my daughter? She brought out the speaker, turned up the old-school jams, and let the kids dance on the freshly cleaned pool deck. We laughed. We broke bread. We told stories. And for the first time in a long time, we felt like a real community. Karen never came outside. 2 weeks later, a moving truck pulled up. Quiet. Quick. And when it left, peace rolled back into Elmcrest Circle like it had been waiting for the eviction notice. You want to know what the real surprise was? It wasn't the footage. It wasn't the lawsuit. It wasn't even the court win. It was that standing up for myself didn't push people away, it pulled them closer. Folks I hadn't spoken to in years were now waving across the street, dropping by with stories of their own. Because sometimes when you fight back, you don't just reclaim your yard. You reclaim your voice. And when you reclaim your voice, oh, that's a surprise nobody forgets. Especially not Karen. This story wasn't just about a pool. It was about boundaries, physical, emotional, spiritual. It was about what happens when you're pushed long enough and you finally say, that's enough. Because sometimes doing the right thing means getting uncomfortable. And sometimes the loudest act of resistance is peace.